The courtroom smelled like old wood and recycled air. I sat 2 rows behind my lawyer, hands folded in my lap, watching the fluorescent lights flicker above the judge's bench. The bailiff stood near the door, arms crossed, bored. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sat across the aisle with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Carolyn who smiled like she'd already won. And maybe she thought she had. Sarah certainly did. I could tell by the way she leaned back in her chair, one hand resting on the table, fingers drumming a soft rhythm against the wood. Confident. Rehearsed. She wore a navy blouse and pearl earrings, the kind of outfit that said, trustworthy, without trying too hard. Her mother sat in the gallery behind her, nodding along to whatever Carolyn whispered. The judge, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, shuffled through papers on his desk. He'd heard Sarah's testimony that morning, how I was controlling, paranoid, prone to jealous outbursts. How she feared for her safety. How she needed protection and a favorable settlement because of the emotional trauma I'd caused. Carolyn had painted me as unstable, obsessive, a man who couldn't accept that his marriage had simply run its course. Sarah had cried on cue. Her voice had trembled in all the right places. I'd sat there and taken it, stone-faced, while my lawyer scribbled notes. Now it was my turn. The judge looked up over his glasses. Mr. Harrison, your attorney mentioned you have evidence you'd like to present? I nodded. My lawyer, Frank, stood and walked to the defense table, pulling a small USB drive from his briefcase. Your Honor, my client has security footage that directly contradicts the testimony provided this morning. We request permission to present it now. The judge waved a hand. Go ahead. I watched Sarah's expression. She didn't flinch. Didn't even glance my way. Just kept that same calm, slightly amused look, like this was an inconvenience she'd tolerate before heading home. Carolyn leaned over and whispered something. Sarah nodded, still smiling. Frank plugged the drive into the laptop connected to the courtroom's projector. The screen on the wall lit up, showing a frozen image, a timestamp in the corner, a familiar angle of our living room. I knew what came next. I'd watched it 100 times, each viewing colder than the last. But Sarah didn't know. That was the thing. She had no idea I'd installed the camera after the first time I'd found her phone unlocked on the counter, messages scrolling past from a number saved under Jess from Yoga. She didn't know I'd been documenting everything for months. She thought I was too broken to think straight, too hurt to be strategic. The judge leaned forward. Whenever you're ready, counsel. Frank pressed play. The room went quiet. Even the bailiff straightened up. And for the first time since we'd walked into that courtroom, I saw Sarah's smile falter. Just a flicker, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Her fingers stopped drumming. Her mother shifted in her seat. Before the footage could reveal what I knew it would, I let myself remember. I thought back to the beginning, to the night it all started unraveling. To the moment I realized the woman I'd married had become someone I didn't recognize. It started with small things. A phone turned face down on the kitchen counter. Shower times that stretched from 10 minutes to 30. New perfume I hadn't seen her buy. I didn't think much of it at first. Sarah had always been particular about her routines, her privacy. We'd been married 6 years. You learn to give each other space. But then came the late meetings that weren't on her work calendar, the girls' nights that happened 3 times a week, the way she'd laugh at her phone screen and then go quiet when I walked into the room. I'm not the jealous type. Never have been. I trusted her completely, which maybe made me stupid, or maybe just human. But trust has a breaking point, and mine came on a Thursday in March. She'd said she was working late, some project deadline that couldn't wait. I'd offered to bring her dinner. She'd said no, too busy, don't worry about it. So I stayed home, watched a game, fell asleep on the couch. When she came in just past midnight, her blouse was buttoned wrong. One button off, the whole thing sitting crooked. She didn't notice. Kissed my forehead, said she was exhausted, went straight to bed. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to logic my way out of what I was thinking. People make mistakes when they're tired. Buttons get mixed up. It didn't mean anything. But the next morning I checked our credit card statement. Dinner for two at Marcello's, the Italian place downtown, charged at $9.15 the night before, while she was supposedly buried in spreadsheets at the office. I didn't confront her. I wrote down the date, the amount, the restaurant name. Started a document on my laptop, password protected, saved in a folder marked Taxes 2019. After that, I started noticing everything. The way she angled her phone away from me when typing. The new gym membership she never mentioned. The fact that our bedroom, which used to smell like her lavender lotion, now carried traces of cologne, something woody, expensive, not mine. I bought a small security camera, the kind that looks like a smoke detector, and installed it in the living room. Told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself I'd delete the footage in a week and apologize to no one but myself for doubting her. 3 days later, I watched it happen. I was at work, checking the live feed during lunch out of morbid curiosity. Sarah came home early, 2 in the afternoon, middle of a Wednesday. She wasn't alone. The man was tall, wearing a suit, maybe 40. They didn't waste time with pleasantries. I watched her kiss him in our entryway, the same spot where we used to leave notes for each other on the hallway mirror. Watched them move to the couch, the one we'd picked out together at IKEA, laughing about how impossible the instructions were. I didn't watch the rest. Didn't need to. I closed the laptop, sat in my car in the parking lot, and felt something inside me go quiet. Not rage. Not even sadness, really. Just clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. I drove back to the office, finished my shift, came home at the usual time. She was cooking dinner, humming along to the radio. Asked me how my day was. I said fine. We ate pasta. Talked about her mother's birthday coming up. She smiled at me across the table, the same smile I'd fallen in love with years ago, and I realized I didn't know her anymore. Maybe I never had. That night, I moved the camera to the bedroom. Added another one in the hallway. Started saving everything to a cloud drive. I didn't cry. Didn't break anything. Just documented. Date, time, location. Built a case the way you'd build a wall, brick by brick, with no gaps. I stopped sleeping on my side of the bed. Started staying on the very edge, as far from her as the mattress would allow, facing the wall. She never noticed, or if she did, she never said anything. Maybe she was relieved. Maybe it made things easier for her. Less guilt when you don't have to look someone in the eye. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to her breathe, wondering if she was thinking about him. Wondering if she ever thought about me at all anymore. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the performance. Coming home every evening, asking about her day, nodding along while she invented details about meetings that never happened and coworkers I'd never heard her mention before. She'd gotten good at lying, smooth and natural, like she'd been practicing. And maybe she had been, for longer than I wanted to consider. I became a student of her deceptions, cataloging each one with the same detachment I'd use for a work project. Monday, said she was at yoga. Phone GPS showed her at a hotel on 5th Street. Wednesday, claimed her mother needed help with groceries, but her mother posted photos from a casino trip on Facebook. Friday, late meeting again, but her office building's parking lot was empty when I drove past at 8. I didn't confront her because confrontation would have ended it too quickly, on her terms, with her narrative. She'd have cried, apologized, maybe blamed me for working too much or not being attentive enough. She'd have controlled the story, made herself the victim of circumstance, a woman who made a mistake because her marriage was already broken. And part of me, the part that still remembered who we used to be, might have believed her. Might have tried to fix it. So I stayed quiet and let her think she was winning. Instead, I focused on building something she couldn't talk her way out of. I met with Frank Murphy, a divorce attorney whose office sat above a dry cleaner on the east side of town. He was in his 50s, balding, with reading glasses that hung on a chain around his neck. His office smelled like coffee and old paper. I brought him everything: the credit card statements, the camera footage, screenshots of text messages I'd recovered from our phone bill. He watched the videos without expression, took notes in careful handwriting, then looked at me across his cluttered desk. "This is solid," he said. "But you need more if she's going to claim emotional abuse or try to paint you as unstable. Document everything. Keep your distance. Don't engage. And whatever you do, don't let her know you're preparing." So I became invisible in my own house. Stopped asking questions. Stopped caring about the answers. When she said she'd be late, I said okay. When she went out with friends, I didn't ask which ones. I cooked my own meals, did my own laundry, lived like a guest in a hotel where I happened to know the other occupant. She seemed almost grateful for the space. Her lies became lazier, less detailed, like she didn't think she needed to try as hard anymore. I installed more cameras. One in the garage. One pointed at the driveway. Got a dashboard camera for my car that recorded constantly, time-stamped and GPS tagged, just in case she ever tried to claim I'd followed her or threatened her. I saved every email, every text, backed them up in 3 separate places. Started keeping a journal, not emotional, just factual. Dates, times, observations. March 18th. She came home at 1 a.m., said she lost track of time at Rachel's. Rachel posted Instagram story at 9 p.m. showing she was home with her kids. March 22nd. Found hotel receipt in her coat pocket. Room 314, checked in at 3 p.m., checked out at 7 p.m. She said she was at a dentist appointment. My co-workers asked if I was okay. I'd lost weight without trying, wasn't sleeping much, probably looked like hell. I told them I was fine, just busy. Kept my head down, did my work, went home to a house that felt like a crime scene I was carefully preserving. Some nights I'd sit in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside, steeling myself for another evening of pretending. Other nights I'd stay late at the office just to avoid her entirely. The turning point came in May. She told me she wanted a divorce. Said it calmly, over breakfast, like she was mentioning the weather. Said we'd grown apart, that she needed space to find herself, that it wasn't anyone's fault. I watched her deliver the speech she'd probably rehearsed, and I felt nothing but a cold sense of timing. She wanted out on her terms, before I could discover what I'd already known for months. She thought she could control this too. I looked at her across the table and said, "Okay, let's do it right. Get lawyers involved." She seemed relieved, almost happy. Later that day, I called Frank. Told him it was time. He said he'd start the paperwork. I went home, backed up all the footage one more time, and labeled a USB drive with a single date. The first time I'd caught them together on camera. Then I sealed it in an envelope and locked it in my desk drawer. Whatever happened next, I was ready. Frank filed the papers in June. Standard dissolution of marriage, equitable distribution of assets, no fault cited on the initial documents. Sarah's attorney, Carolyn Davies, responded within a week with a counterclaim that made my stomach turn. Sarah was seeking primary ownership of the house, half my retirement account, alimony, and a restraining order based on alleged emotional abuse and controlling behavior. The filing described me as volatile, jealous, prone to monitoring her movements and making her feel unsafe in her own home. It was a preemptive strike, designed to discredit anything I might say before I could say it. Frank read through it in his office while I sat across from him, hands clenched in my lap. "She's trying to flip the script," he said. "Make you the bad guy so when we present evidence of her affair, it looks like retaliation from an angry husband. It's smart, actually. Carolyn's good at this." He looked up at me over his glasses. "But we're better. And we have something she doesn't, the truth, time-stamped and recorded." We spent the next 2 months building the case with surgical precision. Frank hired a forensic accountant who traced every suspicious charge on our joint accounts. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts I'd never received. Turned out Sarah had been using our money to fund her affair for almost a year. Flowers sent to an address I didn't recognize. Weekend getaways charged as business conferences that never appeared on her work calendar. The accountant assembled it all into a spreadsheet, color-coded and cross-referenced, showing a pattern of deception that was impossible to dismiss. Meanwhile, I organized the camera footage chronologically. Dozens of clips, each one labeled with date and time. I didn't just have the one incident from March, I had months of evidence. Her bringing him to our house on weekday afternoons. The two of them on our couch, in our kitchen, laughing like they owned the place. I copied everything to multiple drives, stored them in different locations. One in Frank's office safe, one in a safety deposit box at the bank, one hidden in my apartment. I'd moved out in July, couldn't stand being in that house anymore. Sarah played her part perfectly. She posted on social media about finding herself, healing from a toxic relationship, surrounding herself with supportive friends. Her mother left comments calling her brave. Friends who didn't know the truth rallied around her. I watched it all unfold online and said nothing. Let her build her house of cards as high as she wanted. The higher it went, the harder it would fall. In August, depositions began. Sarah sat across a conference table from Frank and performed flawlessly. Tearful but composed. She described a marriage where she'd walked on eggshells, where I'd questioned her every move, accused her of things she'd never done. Said she'd stayed as long as she could but finally had to choose her own mental health. Carolyn guided her through it like a rehearsed play. When it was my turn, I answered every question honestly, calmly, without emotion. Frank had coached me, don't get defensive, don't show anger, just state facts. I did exactly that. Carolyn tried to rattle me, asked about the cameras, implied I was paranoid and invasive. I simply said I'd installed security devices in my own home, which was legal, and left it at that. The court date was set for October. Frank filed a motion to introduce video evidence, citing its relevance to the question of credibility and the validity of Sarah's abuse claims. Carolyn objected, called it a violation of privacy, argued it was illegally obtained. The judge reviewed the circumstances and ruled in our favor. The cameras were in common areas of a jointly owned home, fully legal. We were cleared to present everything. 2 weeks before trial, I went to Frank's office one last time. He had the USB drive on his desk, the one I'd sealed months ago. "You ready for this?" he asked. I nodded. I'd been ready since the morning I watched her lie to my face over breakfast. Since the night I decided that silence was stronger than shouting. Since the moment I chose strategy over rage. "Let's finish it," I said. The footage began to play. The timestamp read March 20th, 2:17 p.m. Our living room filled the screen, empty at first, just the couch and coffee table visible in the frame. Then the front door opened. Sarah walked in first, laughing at something, her hand reaching back to pull someone through the doorway. The man from that first video appeared, the one in the expensive suit. He said something I couldn't hear from where I sat. The courtroom audio was off, but whatever it was made her laugh harder. She dropped her purse on the table, the same table where we used to eat breakfast together on Sunday mornings. I kept my eyes forward, watching the screen, but my peripheral vision caught Sarah's reaction. Her posture had changed. The confident lean was gone. She sat upright now, rigid, one hand gripping the edge of the table. Carolyn leaned over, whispering something urgent. Sarah shook her head slightly, not looking away from the projection. Her mother had gone completely still in the gallery behind her. On screen, Sarah and the man moved to the couch. The timestamp continued its steady count. Frank had edited nothing, removed nothing. This was exactly what had happened, in real time, undeniable. The judge watched with his fingers steepled under his chin, expression neutral but focused. The bailiff had abandoned any pretense of disinterest. Even the court reporter glanced up from her machine. Frank let it play for 2 minutes, then paused it. Your Honor, we have approximately 40 hours of similar footage spanning 11 months. All of it shows the plaintiff entertaining the same individual in the marital home during times when she claimed to be at work, at her mother's home, or attending various social events. I can play more if the court wishes, but I believe the pattern is established. The judge nodded slowly. I think we have sufficient context, Counselor. Mrs. Harrison, do you dispute the authenticity of this recording? Sarah opened her mouth, closed it. Carolyn stood quickly. Your Honor, my client's private activities, while perhaps morally questionable, have no bearing on her claims of emotional abuse. The presence of... The judge held up a hand. Counselor, your client testified under oath this morning that she had been faithful throughout the marriage, and that Mr. Harrison's accusations of infidelity were proof of his paranoid and controlling nature. This evidence directly contradicts that testimony. I'm inclined to hear what else Mr. Murphy has to present. Frank pulled up a new file. Bank statements appeared on screen, line after line highlighted in yellow. These are charges made to the couple's joint account over the past 14 months. Hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts purchased from jewelry stores and florists, none of which Mrs. Harrison can account for in her discovery responses. The total exceeds $37,000. He clicked to the next slide. This is Mrs. Harrison's work calendar, obtained through subpoena. You'll notice that on 17 separate occasions, charges were made during business hours when she claimed to be in meetings or at conferences. Her employer has confirmed she was not at work on any of these dates. I watched Sarah's face as the numbers scrolled past. The confidence had completely drained away. She looked smaller somehow, hunched in her chair, no longer meeting anyone's eyes. Her mother had her hand over her mouth. Carolyn shuffled papers frantically, trying to find some angle, some response that could counter what was displayed in front of everyone. Frank wasn't finished. Additionally, Your Honor, we have text message records. A new document filled the screen. I recognized the messages immediately. I'd read them so many times I had them memorized. Conversations between Sarah and the man, whose name turned out to be Marcus Hale, discussing me, calling me clueless, joking about how easy it was to lie, planning their next meeting while I was at work. One message from Sarah read, "He actually believes I'm at yoga. God, this is almost too easy." The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the projector fan. The judge removed his glasses, cleaned them with a cloth from his desk, put them back on. Mrs. Harrison, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you commit perjury in your testimony this morning? Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. I didn't think. She trailed off. Carolyn put a hand on her arm, leaned in close. They had a hurried, whispered conference. Finally, Carolyn stood. Your Honor, we request a recess to consult with our client. Denied, the judge said flatly. Mrs. Harrison, answer the question. Did you lie under oath about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Hale and about your husband's allegations? A long pause. Sarah's hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap, trying to steady herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, nothing like the confident woman who'd testified that morning. Yes, I lied. I was seeing someone else. But that doesn't change the fact that... The judge cut her off. That's enough. Counselor Davies, your client has admitted to perjury in my courtroom. I'm striking her entire testimony from this morning. Furthermore, given the documented evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, I'm inclined to rule that the marital dissolution was caused by Mrs. Harrison's actions. This will factor heavily into asset distribution and any potential alimony considerations. He looked at Frank. Mr. Murphy, do you have additional evidence, or shall we proceed to your client's testimony? Frank glanced at me. I gave him the smallest nod. We have more, Your Honor, but I believe the essential facts are established. My client is prepared to testify now. The judge made a note on his pad. Very well. Mr. Harrison, please take the stand. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the witness box. As I passed Sarah's table, I didn't look at her. Didn't need to. The screen had said everything that mattered. I'd spent months in silence, collecting truth while she'd built lies. Now the lies were rubble, and I didn't need to say a word. The footage had spoken for me. 3 years later, I sold the house. Didn't need it anymore, didn't want the memories. The judge had awarded me full ownership in the settlement. Sarah walked away with almost nothing after the perjury and financial evidence came to light. No alimony, minimal asset distribution, and a court record that would follow her for years. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved 2 states over, tried to start fresh somewhere people didn't know the story. I didn't keep track. Didn't need to. I bought a small condo downtown, closer to work, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in morning light. Started running again, something I'd stopped doing during the marriage. Lost the weight I'd gained from stress, then lost more until I felt like myself again. Dated a few people, nothing serious, and that was fine. I wasn't in a rush. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for the other shoe to drop. The cameras are long gone. I threw them away the week after the trial ended, didn't even bother selling them. They'd served their purpose. The USB drives are gone too. I kept them for a year in case Sarah appealed, which she never did, then erased everything and tossed them in a dumpster behind my building. There was something cleansing about it, watching those small pieces of plastic disappear into the trash. The footage didn't matter anymore. The truth had been told, justice had been served, and holding on to it would have meant holding on to her. Sometimes I drive past the courthouse on my way to the gym. It's just a building now, nothing special, no weight attached to it. I don't think about that day often, but when I do, it's without anger. What I remember most isn't Sarah's face when the video played, or the judge's ruling, or even the validation of being believed. It's the silence. The moment right before Frank pressed play, when I sat in that courtroom and realized I'd done everything right. I'd been patient when I wanted to scream. Strategic when I wanted to break things. Silent when silence was the strongest weapon I had. Last month, someone at work asked me if I'd ever get married again. I said maybe, with the right person, with honesty from the start. They asked if I was bitter about what happened. I thought about it for a moment, really considered it. Then I said no. Bitter would mean she still had power over me, still occupied space in my head rent-free. The truth is, I barely think about her anymore. She's a chapter that ended, a lesson learned, a story I sometimes tell when someone asks why I take trust so seriously. I don't need revenge anymore. Don't need vindication or closure or the last word. I got something better. I got my life back. And on quiet Sunday mornings, when light floods through my windows and the city hums below, I realize that's all I ever really wanted. Peace. The kind that comes when you fought for the truth and won, then learned to let it go.